The colony ship New Horizon drifted through the dark void of space like a metal whale swimming through an ocean of stars. Inside its massive hull, 50,000 sleeping humans lay in cryopods, dreaming of the new world they would soon call home. The ship had been traveling for 6 months, heading toward the Andromeda sector where humanity hoped to build its first colony outside their home. Galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, staring out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. Through the main viewport, his weathered face showed the lines of a man who had spent decades among the stars, hauling cargo and passengers between distant worlds. At 45 he was neither young nor old, but something about his dark eyes suggested he had seen more than his share of loss. "Captain, we're approaching the jump point," said Lisa Park from the navigation station. She was a sharp woman in her 30s with short black hair and quick fingers that danced across her control panel. "We should drop out of hyperspace in about 10 minutes. Jake nodded and turned to check on his crew. Sam Rodriguez, the chief engineer, was monitoring the ship's massive engines from his station. He was a stocky man with grease-stained hands and a talent for keeping machines running when they should have died years ago. Dr. Amy Watson sat at the medical station, reviewing the health data from the sleeping colonists. She was a kind woman, with gentle eyes, who had joined the mission to help build a better world for humanity. "Everything looks good on my end," Sam reported. "The engines are running smooth and all systems are green." "Same here," Dr. Watson added. "The colonists are all stable, no problems with the cryosystems." Jake felt a familiar tightness in his chest as he thought about the sleeping families below. So many people trusting him to get them safely to their new home. So many children who would grow up on an alien world, so many couples who would build lives together under foreign stars. The weight of their hopes pressed down on him like a physical thing. He pushed the feeling away as he always did. There was no point in dwelling on what could go wrong. He had a job to do, and he would do it. That was all that mattered now. "Dropping out of hyperspace in 5 minutes, Lisa announced. The bridge grew quiet as the crew prepared for the transition. Dropping out of hyperspace was always a delicate moment. The ship's computers had to calculate their position perfectly, or they could end up light years off course. Jake had made this transition hundreds of times in his career, but he never stopped feeling nervous about it. 3 minutes, Lisa called out. Jake gripped the armrests of his captain's chair. Through the viewport, the swirling colors of hyperspace began to slow and stabilize. Soon they would be back in normal space, with real stars and real planets visible through the darkness. 1 minute. The ship's hull began to vibrate as the hyperspace engines powered down. Jake could feel the familiar sensation of reality shifting around them, like stepping from a dream into the waking world. Dropping out now. The colors outside the viewport suddenly stopped swirling and snapped into focus. Real stars appeared, scattered across the black canvas of space like diamonds on velvet. Jake felt the slight lurch in his stomach that always came with the transition, and then they were back in normal space, but something was wrong. "Captain," Lisa said, her voice tight with concern, "we're not where we're supposed to be." Jake leaned forward in his chair. "What do you mean?" "The star patterns don't match our navigation charts. We should be in the Kepler system, but these constellations are all wrong." Before Jake could respond, Sam's voice cut through the bridge chatter. "Captain, we've got a problem." "Something big just appeared on our sensors." Jake turned to look at the main screen, and his blood ran cold. A massive shape was materializing out of the darkness, blocking out the stars behind it. It was huge, easily 10 times the size of the New Horizon, and covered in strange markings that seemed to glow with their own light. "What is that thing?" Dr. Watson whispered. The alien ship was unlike anything in human records. Its hull was dark as midnight, but veins of blue energy ran across its surface like lightning frozen in metal. Weapons that looked like they could crack moons jutted from its sides, and at its center was a structure that seemed to bend space around itself. "It's beautiful," Lisa breathed, then caught herself. "And terrifying." Jake felt his heart pounding in his chest. In all his years of space travel, he had never seen anything like this. Humanity had made contact with a few alien races, but they had all been peaceful traders and explorers. This ship looked like it was built for war. Are they scanning us? Jake asked. Sam checked his instruments. Yes, sir. Deep scans. They're looking at everything from our hull composition to our crew quarters. They know exactly what we are and how many people we have on board. The bridge fell silent as they watched the alien vessel. It hung in space like a predator studying its prey, massive and silent and utterly alien. Jake tried to think of what to do. They were unarmed except for basic defensive systems. Against a ship like this, they wouldn't last 5 minutes in a fight. Then something happened that made Jake's blood freeze. A voice spoke inside his head, not through his ears but directly into his mind. The words were clear and cold and filled with ancient authority. I am Zarthok the Destroyer. I have come to test your species. Every person on the bridge jerked as if they had been struck by lightning. The alien's voice echoed in their minds like thunder in a canyon, impossible to ignore or shut out. You will send me your strongest warrior, the voice continued. We will fight, and I will judge whether your kind deserves to live or die. This is the law of the Kethmori, and it has been so for 10,000 years. Jake's hands gripped his chair so hard his knuckles went white. Around him, his crew sat frozen in terror. He could feel their fear like a living thing, filling the bridge with its cold presence. The alien ship began to move closer, its weapons powering up with a sound like distant thunder. Jake knew that in the next few minutes he would have to make a choice that would decide the fate of every human on board his ship. And he had no idea what that choice should be. The alien's voice filled every corner of the New Horizon, reaching into the minds of all 50,000 humans aboard the ship. Even those sleeping in cryopods stirred restlessly as the telepathic message burned through their dreams. On the bridge, Jake Morrison watched his crew struggle with the mental invasion, their faces pale with shock and fear. Captain, Lisa Park gasped, pressing her hands to her temples. That thing is inside our heads. How is it talking to us like this? Jake felt the alien presence in his own mind like ice water in his veins. The voice of Zarthok was cold and ancient, carrying the weight of countless civilizations that had fallen before him. But Jake had learned to live with cold things in his mind. The guilt and grief that had haunted him for 3 years had taught him how to function while something terrible lived inside his thoughts. Stay calm, Jake told his crew. Don't let it break your focus. Dr. Watson looked up from her medical station, her face tight with worry. Captain, the telepathic contact is causing stress reactions throughout the ship. Heart rates are spiking, and some people are having panic attacks. If this continues, we could lose people to heart failure. Jake nodded grimly. He had to end this quickly before the alien's presence killed his passengers through sheer terror. He opened the ship's communication channel and spoke into the void. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human colony ship New Horizon. We are peaceful travelers carrying families to a new world. We have no warriors aboard our ship. The aliens' laughter echoed through their minds like breaking glass. Every species says the same thing, human. They all claim to be peaceful. They all beg for mercy. But the strong survive by being strong, and the weak die because they are weak. This is the way of the universe. Through the viewport, Jake could see the massive alien ship moving closer. Its weapons were fully powered now, crackling with energy that made the space around them ripple like water. He knew that if this Zarthok decided to attack, the New Horizon would be destroyed in seconds. You have 1 hour, the alien voice continued. Send me your strongest warrior, or I will destroy your ship and every life aboard it. Choose wisely, human captain. The telepathic connection ended, leaving the bridge in sudden silence. Jake's crew looked at him with desperate eyes, waiting for him to somehow solve this impossible problem. But Jake had no solutions. He was just a cargo hauler who had been given command of a colony ship because he had the most experience with long-distance travel. Captain, Sam Rodriguez spoke up from his engineering station. I'm reading massive power signatures from that ship. They're Smallest weapon could crack our hull open like an egg. Jake activated the ship's internal communication system. This is the captain speaking to all department heads. Report to Conference Room Alpha immediately. We have a situation. 20 minutes later, Jake sat at the head of a table surrounded by his senior staff and the leaders of the colony mission. The room was filled with worried faces and nervous whispers. These were doctors and teachers, farmers and engineers, people who had signed up to build a new world, not to fight an alien warrior. You've all heard the aliens' demand, Jake began. It wants us to send our strongest fighter to face this Zarthok. In single combat, if we refuse, it will destroy the ship. Dr. Martinez, the colony's chief medical officer, shook his head. Captain, we've run scans on that creature. It's 12 feet tall and appears to be made of some kind of living crystal. Its bone density is off the charts, and we're detecting energy readings that suggest it has superhuman strength. What about our security teams? Asked Colonel Roberts, the head of the ship's small military contingent. I have 20 Marines. Aboard, all combat veterans. Jake looked at the colonel's weathered face. Roberts was a good man, a soldier who had served humanity faithfully for 30 years. But Jake had seen the alien ship's weapons, felt the power of its telepathic abilities. Sending Roberts or any of his Marines would be sending them to die. Colonel, what's your honest assessment? Jake asked. Roberts was quiet for a long moment. Captain, I've fought pirates and raiders across 3 star systems. I've never backed down from a fight, but this thing, it's not human. It's not even close to human. My best Marines might last 30 seconds against it. The room fell silent. Jake could see the fear in their eyes, the growing realization that they were facing something beyond their ability to fight. 50,000 people, including thousands of children, were going to die because humanity had encountered something stronger than they were. There has to be another way, Dr. Watson said. Maybe we can negotiate with it. Offer it something it wants. What could we possibly offer a being that can destroy planets? Asked Lisa Park. Jake stood up from the table and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the alien ship waiting in the darkness like a spider in its web. For 3 years, he had carried the weight of his family's death, the knowledge that he had failed to protect the people he loved most. Now, he was facing the same choice again, but this time 50,000 lives hung in the balance. Captain, Colonel Roberts said quietly, I know what you're thinking, but you're not a fighter. You're a good man and a fine captain, but you're not trained for combat. Jake turned back to face the room. You're right, Colonel, I'm not a warrior. I'm just a cargo hauler who got lucky enough to be given command of this ship. But I'm also the one responsible for every life aboard the New Horizon. Sir, you can't be serious, Dr. Watson protested. That thing will kill you in seconds. Jake smiled sadly. Maybe, but I'm the captain. These people are my responsibility. If someone has to die to give them a chance to live, then it should be me. The truth was simpler than Jake could explain to his crew. He had already lost everything that mattered to him. His wife Claire and daughter Sophie had died 3 years ago in a pirate raid while he was away on a routine supply run. The guilt had eaten away at him ever since, leaving him hollow inside. He had joined the colony mission not because he wanted a new life, but because he was tired of the old one. I'll contact the alien, Jake said. Tell it that I accept the challenge. Captain, please, Lisa begged. There has to be another way. Jake looked at his crew, these good people who had trusted him to lead them to safety. He thought of the families sleeping in cryopods below, the children who would grow up to see an alien sky. Maybe he couldn't save himself, but he could give them a chance. The decision is made, Jake said firmly. I'm going to face this Zarthok, and I'm going to give it the fight of its life. Even as he spoke the words, Jake felt something stir inside him that he thought had died with his family. Not hope, exactly, but something close to it. For the first time in 3 years, he had a reason to fight that was bigger than his own pain. The alien wanted humanity's strongest warrior. Jake Morrison wasn't strong, but he was something else entirely. He was a man who had already lost everything, and that made him the most dangerous kind of opponent. Jake Morrison stood in the shuttle bay of the New Horizon, staring at the small transport pod that would carry him to the alien ship. His crew had gathered around him, their faces filled with worry and fear. Dr. Watson held a medical scanner in her hands, but Jake waved her away. "No point in checking my vital signs, Doc," Jake said quietly. "We both know what's going to happen." "Captain, please reconsider," Lisa Parks said, her voice breaking. "Let me go instead." "Or Colonel Roberts." "Anyone but you?" Jake shook his head. "The alien asked for our strongest warrior." "I'm not the strongest, but I'm the one who has to go. This is my ship, my responsibility." Sam Rodriguez stepped forward with a small device in his hands. "Captain, I rigged up a comm unit. It might work even on that alien ship. If something goes WRO. If something goes wrong, you get these people to safety?" Jake interrupted. "That's an order." Jake climbed into the transport pod and sealed the hatch. Through the small window, he could see his crew watching him with desperate eyes. These were good people who had trusted him to lead them to a new world. Now he was leaving them behind to face a monster that had destroyed civilizations. The pod launched from the shuttle bay and drifted through space toward the massive alien ship. As Jake got closer, he could see that the vessel was even more impressive than it had appeared from a distance. Its hull was covered in strange symbols that seemed to move and shift in the light. Weapons the size of buildings jutted from its sides, and at its center was a structure that hurt to look at directly. A blue beam of light surrounded Jake's pod and pulled it into the alien ship's docking bay. The transport settled onto a platform made of some kind of black metal that seemed to absorb light. Jake opened the hatch and stepped out into an atmosphere that tasted of ozone and ancient power. The docking bay was huge, easily large enough to hold a dozen ships the size of the New Horizon. The walls were covered in carvings that showed battles fought across the galaxy, with creatures of all shapes and sizes falling before a single towering figure. Jake didn't need to guess who that figure was. "Welcome, human." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the walls like thunder. Jake turned to see a figure walking toward him from the shadows, and his breath caught in his throat. Zarthok the Destroyer was everything the stories claimed and more. He stood 12 feet tall, his body covered in crystalline armor that pulsed with inner fire. His face was alien but somehow noble, with glowing blue eyes that seemed to see right through Jake's soul. When he moved, space itself seemed to bend around him. "You are not what I expected," Zarthok said, his voice now coming from his own mouth rather than Jake's mind. "My sensors indicate you are neither the strongest nor the fastest of your species. Why do you come before me?" Jake straightened his shoulders and looked up at the alien giant. "Because I'm the captain of that ship. Those people are my responsibility." Zarthok laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Responsibility. A concept the weak use to justify their failures. Do you know how many beings have stood where you stand now? How many have spoken of duty and honor before I crushed them?" "I'm sure it's a lot," Jake said, "but I'm here anyway." The alien warrior studied Jake with those burning blue eyes. "You are afraid, yet you do not flee. You are weak, yet you do not beg. Tell me, human, what drives you to face certain death?" Jake thought of Claire and Sophie, of the life he had lost and the guilt that had consumed him. He thought of the 50,000 people sleeping on his ship, trusting him to keep them safe. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than emptiness in his chest. "I've already lost everything that mattered to me," Jake said. "My wife and daughter died while I was away on a supply run. I wasn't there to protect them. I've been carrying that failure for 3 years, and it's been eating me alive." Zarthok's expression changed slightly, as if he was seeing Jake for the first time. "You seek death as an escape from your pain?" "Maybe I did," Jake admitted, "but not anymore. Those people on my ship, they still have hope. They still have families to protect and dreams to chase. I won't let you take that away from them." The alien warrior gestured with one crystalline hand, and the air around them shimmered. The docking bay dissolved, replaced by a massive arena carved from a single piece of black stone. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to writhe and move and the floor was stained with the blood of 1,000 fallen warriors. "This is the arena of judgment," Zarthok announced. "Here, the strong prove their worth and the weak meet their end. You will face me in combat, human. If you somehow manage to defeat me, your species will be spared. If you fall, as all others have fallen, your people will be destroyed." Jake looked around the arena, taking in the alien architecture and the sense of ancient power that filled the air. He had never been in a place like this, never faced a challenge like this. But he had faced loss and grief and the crushing weight of failure. Compared to that, even this alien monster seemed manageable. "I understand," Jake said. "But I want you to know something before we start. I'm not here to win. I'm here to make sure you remember fighting me." Zarthok raised his hand, and a dome of energy surrounded them both. The arena was now sealed, and only one of them would leave alive. "You speak bravely for one about to die," the alien said. "But courage without strength is meaningless. I have defeated champions who could crack planets with their bare hands. I have broken the minds of beings who could see across galaxies. What can you possibly do against me?" Jake rolled up his sleeves and took a fighting stance. He wasn't a warrior, but he had learned to fight in the cargo holds and space stations of a dozen worlds. More importantly, he had learned to endure. Pain was an old friend, and failure was a familiar companion. "I can show you what it's like to fight someone who has nothing left to lose," Jake said. Zarthok's eyes flared with blue fire, and he launched himself across the arena with impossible speed. His crystalline fist struck Jake in the chest with the force of a meteor, sending the human flying backward to crash against the arena wall. Jake felt his ribs crack and tasted blood in his mouth, but he got back up. The alien's psychic assault came next, a wave of mental force designed to shatter Jake's mind and break his will. Zarthok had used this technique to defeat countless enemies, driving them insane with visions of their own death. But Jake's mind was already broken. The guilt and grief he had carried for 3 years had built walls around his thoughts, barriers that the alien's attack couldn't penetrate. Where other warriors had crumbled under the psychic pressure, Jake simply absorbed it like a sponge soaking up water. For the first time in 1,200 years of combat, Zarthok the Destroyer felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt surprise. Jake Morrison wiped the blood from his mouth and pushed himself away from the arena wall. His chest burned where Zarthok's fist had connected, and he could feel at least 3 broken ribs grinding against each other. But he was still standing, and that seemed to confuse the alien warrior. "Impossible," Zarthok muttered, his glowing blue eyes narrowing. "My psychic attack should have destroyed your mind. How are you still conscious?" Jake spat blood onto the arena floor and managed a weak smile. "You can't break something that's already broken." The alien's confusion turned to anger. He had conquered 17 galaxies and defeated champions from 1,000 worlds. No mere human should be able to resist his mental assault. Zarthok raised both hands, and waves of psychic energy poured from him like a storm. The attack hit Jake like a wall of ice and fire. Images flooded his mind, visions of his own death played out in 100 different ways. He saw himself crushed under Zarthok's fists, his bones turned to powder, his blood painting the arena floor. Any normal person would have been driven insane by the mental assault, but Jake had been living with worse visions for 3 years. Every night he dreamed of Claire and Sophie dying while he was away. Every morning he woke up to the memory of arriving too late, of finding their bodies in the wreckage of their home. The alien's manufactured nightmares were nothing compared to the real ones that haunted him. "You're going to have to do better than that," Jake said, taking a step forward. Zarthok's crystalline armor flared with brighter light. "Then I will destroy you with my bare hands." The alien moved faster than Jake's eyes could follow. One moment he was across the arena, the next he was right in front of Jake, his massive fist driving toward the human's face. Jake barely managed to duck, feeling the wind from the punch ruffle his hair. He tried to counter with a punch of his own, but his fist bounced off Zarthok's armor like a pebble hitting a mountain. The alien backhanded him casually, sending Jake tumbling across the arena floor. He rolled to avoid a stomp that would have crushed his skull, then scrambled to his feet. "You cannot hurt me, human," Zarthok said, advancing slowly. "My armor is forged from the heart of a dying star. My strength comes from the cosmic forces that bind the universe together. You are nothing but flesh and bone." Jake circled the alien, looking for an opening. He had been in fights before, bar brawls and cargo disputes that turned violent. But this was different. This was like fighting a walking mountain, a creature that seemed to be made of living crystal and pure energy. Another punch came at him, and this time Jake couldn't dodge completely. Zarthok's fist clipped his shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into the arena wall. Jake felt his left arm go numb from the impact. "Why do you continue to fight?" Zarthok asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "You cannot win. You cannot even hurt me. Why do you not surrender?" Jake struggled to his feet, his left arm hanging useless at his side. "Because those people on my ship are counting on me. Because I already failed once when it mattered, and I won't do it again." The alien paused, his head tilting slightly. "You failed once? Tell me about this failure." 3 years ago, Jake said, breathing hard. "I was on a supply run to the outer colonies. Pirates attacked the station where my family was living. I was 3 days away, too far to help. By the time I got there, it was over." Zarthok's glowing eyes studied Jake with new interest. "You blame yourself for their deaths." "I should have been there," Jake said. "I should have protected them. Instead, I was hauling cargo halfway across the galaxy while they died. And now? You seek to die fighting me, believing it will somehow balance the scales of your failure." Jake shook his head. "No, I used to think that way. But standing here, facing you, I realized something. I don't want to die. I want to live. I want to make sure those 50,000 people on my ship get to live too." Something changed in Jake's posture, in the way he held himself. The defeat and despair that had weighed him down for 3 years began to lift, replaced by something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Zarthok seemed to sense the change. "You are different now. The broken thing I saw when you arrived is becoming something else." "Yeah," Jake said, raising his good hand. "I'm becoming someone who won't give up." The alien attacked again, but this time Jake was ready. He couldn't match Zarthok's speed or strength, but he could endure. Every punch he absorbed, every kick he weathered, was one more second that the new horizon remained safe. Every moment he stayed standing was a victory. Jake began to notice patterns in the alien's attacks. Zarthok was incredibly strong and fast, but he fought like someone who had never faced real resistance. His techniques were flashy and powerful, designed to end fights quickly against opponents who would break under the first assault, but Jake wasn't breaking. He was adapting. When Zarthok threw a devastating uppercut, Jake managed to roll with the punch, reducing its impact. When the alien tried to grab him, Jake slipped away like smoke. He couldn't hurt the crystalline warrior, but he could frustrate him. "Stand still and die?" Zarthok roared, his attacks becoming wilder and less controlled. "No thanks," Jake replied, dodging another wild swing. "I've got people to protect." For the first time in the battle, Jake managed to land a solid hit. As Zarthok overextended on a punch, Jake stepped inside his guard and drove his fist into the alien's solar plexus. The impact sent shockwaves through Jake's arm, but he felt something give in the alien's armor. Zarthok staggered backward, his eyes wide with shock. "That should not be possible. Your strength is nothing compared to mine." Jake looked at his fist, surprised to see a small crack in the alien's crystalline armor where he had struck. "Maybe strength isn't everything." The alien's composure began to crack along with his armor. For 1,200 years he had been the strongest being in the galaxy. His victories had been swift and decisive, his enemies crumbling before his power. But this human was different. This human refused to stay down. "What are you?" Zarthok demanded. Jake smiled, and for the first time in 3 years it was a real smile. "I'm just a guy who's tired of running from his problems. I'm someone who's finally found something worth fighting for." The alien warrior looked around the arena, at the symbols of his countless victories carved into the walls. For the first time since he had begun his conquest of the galaxy, Zarthok felt something he had forgotten. He felt doubt. Jake Morrison, battered and bleeding, stood in the center of the arena with his one good arm raised. He was still outmatched, still facing impossible odds. But he was no longer the broken man who had entered the fight. He was something new, something that Zarthok had never encountered before. He was someone who had found hope in the darkest place imaginable, and that made him the most dangerous opponent the alien had ever faced. The arena fell silent except for the sound of Jake's labored breathing. His left arm hung useless at his side, his ribs screamed with every breath, and blood dripped from a dozen cuts on his face. But he was still standing, still moving, still fighting. Across from him, Zarthok stared at the small crack in his crystalline armor with something approaching disbelief. "This cannot be," the alien muttered. "No being in the galaxy has managed to damage my armor. I have faced warriors who could split moons with their strength." Jake wiped blood from his eyes and took a step forward. "Maybe they were fighting for the wrong reasons?" Zarthok's glowing blue eyes snapped up to meet Jake's gaze. "What do you mean?" "Those warriors you defeated," Jake said, his voice growing stronger despite his injuries. "They were probably fighting for glory or honor or to prove how strong. I'm fighting for something different." "And what is that, human?" Jake thought of the new horizon floating in space, filled with sleeping families who trusted him to keep them safe. He thought of Dr. Watson's kind eyes, of Lisa Park's quick smile, of Sam Rodriguez's steady hands. He thought of children who would never see their parents again if he failed here. "I'm fighting for love," Jake said simply. The words seemed to hit Zarthok harder than any physical blow. The alien warrior took a step backward, his perfect composure cracking like his armor. "Love is weakness. Love makes you vulnerable. Love is why your species will never rule the galaxy." "You're wrong," Jake said, advancing despite his injuries. "Love is what makes us strong. It's what makes us willing to sacrifice everything for each other. It's what makes us fight when we should run and stand when we should fall." Zarthok raised his hands and energy crackled between his fingers. "Enough philosophy, human. I will end this now." The alien launched himself forward with all his remaining strength, his crystalline fists blazing with cosmic fire. But this time, Jake didn't try to dodge or block. Instead, he stepped forward to meet the attack, wrapping his good arm around Zarthok's waist in what looked like a desperate embrace. The alien's punch connected with Jake's chest, driving the air from his lungs, and sending waves of agony through his broken ribs. But Jake held on, his face pressed against Zarthok's armor, his arm locked around the alien's waist. "What are you doing?" Zarthok demanded, trying to push Jake away. "Something you've never experienced," Jake gasped. "I'm choosing not to hurt you when I have the chance." Zarthok felt Jake's hand near the crack in his armor, felt the human's fingers touching the exposed crystal beneath. With Jake's strength enhanced by desperation and determination, one solid blow to that weak spot could shatter the alien's heart. But Jake's hand remained still. "Kill me," Zarthok whispered, confusion replacing the fury in his voice. "You have found my weakness. Strike the blow and claim your victory." Jake looked up into the alien's glowing eyes, seeing something there he hadn't expected. Behind all that power and cosmic fire, Zarthok looked tired, he looked lonely. He looked like someone who had been fighting for so long that he had forgotten why he started. "No," Jake said softly. "I won't kill you." "But you must," Zarthok insisted. "It is the law of combat. The victor destroys the defeated. This is how it has always been." Jake shook his head and slowly released his hold on the alien warrior. "Not today. Today we try something different." Zarthok staggered backward, his mighty frame trembling. "I don't understand." "You have won? Your species has proven its strength? Why do you not claim your victory?" "Because killing you won't make me stronger," Jake said. "It won't bring back my wife and daughter. And it won't make the universe a better place for the people I'm trying to protect." The alien warrior looked down at his hands, at the power that had conquered galaxies and destroyed civilizations. For 1,200 years, He had believed that strength was everything, that the strong had the right to dominate the weak. But this human had shown him something different. "You could have killed me," Zarthok said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You found my weakness, and you chose not to use it. Why?" Jake smiled, and despite his injuries, it was a peaceful smile. "Because mercy is stronger than violence. Because forgiveness is braver than revenge. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose not to fight." Zarthok fell to his knees, his crystalline armor flickering as the power drained from it. "In all my conquests across all the galaxies I have claimed, no one has ever shown me mercy. No one has ever chosen compassion over victory." "Then maybe it's time to learn," Jake said, extending his good hand to help the alien to his feet. Zarthok stared at the offered hand for a long moment, then slowly reached out to take it. Jake pulled the alien warrior to his feet, and for the first time in 1,200 years, Zarthok felt something other than the need to dominate and destroy. "Your species," the alien said slowly, "they are not like the others." "No," Jake agreed. "We're not perfect. We make mistakes, we hurt each other, we fail more often than we succeed. But we also love each other enough to die for strangers. We protect the weak instead of destroying them. We choose hope even when everything seems hopeless." The energy dome around the arena flickered and disappeared. Zarthok looked at Jake with new eyes, seeing not a defeated enemy, but something he had never encountered before. A teacher. "I declare this combat ended," Zarthok announced, his voice carrying to every corner of his massive ship. "The humans have proven themselves worthy, not through strength, but through something far more rare. They have shown wisdom." Jake felt his legs give out, and he collapsed to the arena floor. The adrenaline that had kept him fighting was finally wearing off, and the pain of his injuries crashed over him like a wave. But he was smiling as darkness began to close in around him. He had done it. He had protected his people. Not by being the strongest, not by being the fastest, but by being human. By choosing love over hate, mercy over vengeance, hope over despair. The last thing Jake saw before unconsciousness took him was Zarthok kneeling beside him, the alien's glowing eyes filled with something that looked almost like tears. "Rest, human warrior," the alien whispered. "You have taught me that there are different kinds of strength. And perhaps, for the first time in my long life, I have found one worth possessing." Hours later, Jake woke up in the medical bay of the New Horizon. Dr. Watson was checking his bandages, her face bright with relief and joy. Through the viewport he could see Zarthok's ship moving away into the distance, no longer a threat but somehow transformed into something like a guardian. "Captain," Dr. Watson said softly, "how do you feel?" Jake thought about it for a moment. His body was broken, his ribs were wrapped in medical tape, and his left arm was in a sling. But for the first time in 3 years his heart felt light. "I feel like I'm ready to start living again," he said, outside the viewport. The stars waited for them, bright with promise and possibility. The New Horizon continued its journey toward the Andromeda sector, carrying 50,000 souls toward their new home. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, an ancient warrior was learning what it meant to choose compassion over conquest. Jake Morrison had found something worth fighting for. And in doing so, he had discovered that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from defeating your enemy, but from helping them find a better way to live.